So the price of tomatoes in South Africa have spiked due to crops being damaged by pests. Last week, prices for tomatoes averaged at around 10 rand 72 cents per kilo. But the pest attacks on tomato crops have actually come as the tomato industry itself is still planting and harvesting at lower than usual levels due to the heavy rainfall that we've seen in the past couple of months. In fact, the rains cost the industry almost 100 million rand in December alone. Let's get you a sense of what the consequences are. Bring in Johnny van der Merwe, who's the managing director of Agriculture Information Group, Agrimark Trends. Johnny, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for joining us via our telephone line. It's a bit counterintuitive for people who aren't following the trends, right? We were told that agriculture in this country is actually doing pretty well. You'd imagine that the price of tomatoes as a result of that would go down, but that's obviously not what we're seeing. Why?
Yes, definitely. And I think it must be put into perspective if you think agriculture is doing well as a whole. There's different commodities, there's different subsectors within the agricultural industry that's differently affected by, for instance, higher rainfall and other factors. And I think the weather had a severe impact now on especially the tomato crop of the past month or so. And tomatoes are very susceptible, very vulnerable basically to high rainfall. Farmers that can't get into the fields put on the pesticides, and a tomato that's really sensitive to pests and basically the quality and the size of the fruits and the marketability of tomatoes that was really negatively affected the past month or two, and that's why we saw volumes coming down on the market and of course the prices going up. And my latest statistics was about, I think, 122% higher.
Sure.
The latest tomato price compared to a year ago at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great concern. And it's a myriad of issues, right? This pest attack, we're told, is also among the factors that have contributed to the drop in the supply. Help us understand how unusual these attacks from the pests actually are in a context where I understand usually there are warning mechanisms in place to warn farmers of any kind of, for argument's sake, locust swarms that are on the way.
Yeah, so I think tomatoes in any case, they really high in demand. Well, they really need pesticides to be able to grow. Pesticides, it's got a real or a big impact on the yield of tomatoes. So in a normal year, a below average rainfall year, farmers can get the pesticides on the plant and try to control these pests within this specific year. But a high rainfall year such as this, if they put on the pesticides and you get some rain a day later on, that it washes the pesticides off the plant, and the plant can be negatively affected, or the yield of that plant can be negatively affected again. So I think in a normal year, the farmers really need to have a really intensive pesticide program in any case on tomatoes, just to get crops to the market. But in a year like this, it's just much more difficult to get that right and to get that yield off from a field. Basically. Yeah,
and because farmers and mostly truck drivers are price takers, I imagine stuff like the increase in the fuel price isn't helping.
Yes, definitely. We also planting a bit of sunflower, and I'm firsthand. Can I tell you the impact of just fertilizer prices that went up? Pesticides didn't went up. The cost of pesticides didn't went up as much as fertilizers, for instance, but it was still increased. And a small thing just to get the pesticide or the fertilizer on the farm, it's so much higher cost because you have to transport it there. So, and you have to get your crop away from the field, from the farm again. So all that small factors are adding on to the cost for farmers. And that with this lower production, it puts real economic and financial pressure on the producers out there as well. And hopefully they can keep head above water so that they can plant into the future, and that we don't have, let's say, next year the same problem, that we can have a good enough supply to the markets that can keep prices on a low level. And this is a real good case study. For instance, if the farmers can't get to produce, or production is low in South Africa, this is the impact that it will have on food prices and food inflation in general.
Yeah, that's really preempted my next question. Are you able to help us quantify the scale of the setback at the moment? In other words, how quickly do you reckon we might be able to recover from this, given just how the factors that got us here are so much not in our control?
Yes, so I think tomatoes are, it's a quick, you can see really a quick effect on the market, if I can mention it like that. But usually you see a direct reaction on the market prices when we see higher rainfall in certain times of the year. And then if the weather improves, we can usually get some improvement in the yields, and the market prices can come down again. We have seen extremely high weather towards the Western Cape. High temperatures, not high weather, but high temperatures in the Western Cape about a week, 2 weeks ago. And I think Paarl had, I think it was 44 degrees or something like that. And that also will negatively affect the yields of the crops coming from there. And that's currently the main supply of tomatoes. Keeping prices actually not just that it can shoot out to record prices. So, but we expect within the next 2-3 weeks that yield coming from there, the production coming from the Western Cape, will also be negatively affected. But on the other hand, the consumers are really under pressure at the moment. And I talked to a lot of market agents, and they feel that demand is not really there, that we can see significant upward movement prices, just merely from a demand side, and consumers that's currently more under pressure. So yeah, I think it will depend, and if you look into a maize crop, for instance, that can have a severe effect on the whole season if we have some flood damage that we saw. But I think looking into tomatoes, we can see certain times of a month or of the year that it will have upward movement in prices, but then it can come back again, down again. It depends on the extent of the damage.
Right.
But I don't have really much information regarding the extent of the damage.
Fair enough. Who knew so much could be said about tomatoes? Thank you so much for speaking to us. I really do appreciate you helping us break down some of the factors behind the increase in the price of tomatoes you might have seen at your local supermarket. Johnny van der Merwe is the Managing Director of Agrimark Trends. Once again,